Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hello and welcome to Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette, and it's Thursday. That means it's time for a brand new guest like we do every week, talking about their life, their journey, and everything else about their love of martial arts. My guest today was inducted into the SIG Sourcing Supernova Hall of Fame in 2018 for pioneering leadership and strategic sourcing, procurement, supplier innovation, and digital transformation. He has been studying and teaching martial arts since 1970, often putting what he learned into action while working stadium security part-time. A best-selling author, he's been interviewed by Fox, the Jim Bohannon Show, Computerworld, Forbes, Art of Procurement, Police Magazine, and more. Please welcome to the show, Lawrence Kane. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Good. What we do with all my guests, we go back to the beginning. I want to know that first experience, that first spark. What led to that first interest of martial arts?
Well, there was a bully named Tim.
Really? Okay.
And my dad decided, you know what? We're going to fix that. Hello, Sensei Yamada, meet my son, turn him into a man. So
wow.
I started at the age of 6 and started taking judo. As it turns out, the guy I learned from was the highest ranking black belt in the United States at the time.
Wow. One
of the pioneers of judo in the United States. He was on the 1950 something or other 2, I think, whatever it was, Olympic team. Just amazing martial artist and huge heart. I mean, he'd pile a bunch of us. I live in Seattle. I was in the Seattle area as a kid. And he'd pile a bunch of us into the back of a 1973 Ford LTD station wagon, drive us up over the border to Canada to go compete in Burnaby and get our butts kicked. And all around different tournaments, different places. Just, all on his own, just because he loved the sport, wanted us to do it as well. And it was a great experience. And at one point, Tim and I got into the first fight I fought back in. It was more of a draw than anything else, but eventually became really good friends. So, it's like, well, I don't need this anymore, but I actually kind of like it. So I'm going to keep doing it. So it's just, typical thing you see as a little kid, parents go, drive you to a place and say, hey, put this thing on, go do that stuff. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, I'm kind of liking this. So it wasn't anything very exciting, but it did last. I spent 48 years doing various martial arts of one sort or another.
So how long did you stay with that first instructor?
Did 4 years, took a short break doing some other stuff, and then came back and did another 4 years. So 8 overall.
Wow.
Although I will say the challenge is he taught very traditional Japanese style, and I don't learn very well that way. So I ended up learning, for example, more from a week-long course with a Canadian Olympic judo coach than I probably did in the first 4 years.
Wow.
So, it was more kind of the show, copy, repeat, as opposed to explain why. And the Canadian guy explained why. And so you probably, most people who've looked at judo will know the basic foot sweep, the Sotogari foot sweep throw. And I always did that like a tippy bird. And it never worked. That's like everybody's go-to thing when they first started with judo, and I could never get it to work. And it's because I was trying to do it in a straight line and not a circular movement. And I wish I could remember the guy's name, but the Canadian guy's like, no, you're not doing it right. You need to do this, and here's why. And all of a sudden, it went from my worst movement to my best movement. In fact, I actually won a tournament a month or 2 later using that movement, which I'd never tried in a tournament before because I'd always failed in class.
Okay.
So, it's just one of those things where loved the guy, loved the sport, teaching style didn't really resonate. And eventually I ended up moving to other things, largely because of that, but not exclusively because of that.
Okay. So what led to the competition? Is that something, and I've talked to some guests in the past where their schools they didn't really have a choice. They had to do competition. Was this something you wanted to do, or were you kind of pushed into it at that young age?
No, I was kind of pushed into it. That's how you advance in judo is you compete. And so it really wasn't an option. As I got older, I had this weird upbringing. I'm fairly old. And back in the day, like bragging about yourself and that sort of thing was really frowned on. In fact, in judo, if you showed any expression, if you won, you would be disqualified.
Wow.
So like I actually beat a guy, and probably we this guy kind of the local area, we probably met like 4 times a year in different tournaments. I beat a guy like 3 to 4 times. The 4th one, he beat me, and he did a little fist bump and got disqualified for it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's like, wow. Now today, totally not like that, right? But back then, you're supposed to be really stoic and like it's all about being a good sport and doing things correctly and all that. And so I kind of over-rotated on that a bit in terms of I always wanted to be kind of part of the team and do the right thing. I never really was horribly competitive until I got into high school football. And somebody kind of took me aside and said, dude, if you're going to do this, you need to build a little arrogance here. And you need to be, doing this for you. Yes, you're part of a team, but if you don't have that competitive fire and, try to better yourself constantly, then you're actually both hurting you and the team. And it was it's a weird mindset thing. And this guy's name was Joe. Literally like a 5-minute conversation. I had it's like a switch went off in my brain. All of a sudden I became a competitive person.
Nice.
It's very strange. It was just one of those, like he said it I don't even remember what he said exactly, but I remember where it was, how we were talking, the beer we were drinking that we weren't old enough to drink. And, it was just, it flipped the switch. And so I did a lot of competition after that, largely in these things like fencing, sword fighting type stuff, some empty hand things, but mostly weapons forms, where it was very competitive, very, think of like kendo for those who are, traditional Japanese, but instead of a shinai, it's a solid rattan boken, and you're hitting full power.
Wow.
That sort of stuff. Yeah. And so, it was, but it was a kind of a cool moment because I somehow had, too many manners. And the fact that I could actually, we did judo, boxing, and wrestling in high school, which was something that I found kind of like today, you'd probably never do that. But, I'd be out there and in the judo part, I did really well because I had some skill in it. In the boxing, I was kind of a moving punching bag. And in the wrestling, I was kind of in the middle. But as soon as that switch flipped, I remember there was a guy probably outweighed me by like 60 pounds. And he was one of the, I think he was a defensive back. I don't remember anymore. This has been a long time ago. And we were going at it. And typically one of the PE instructors, if it got out of hand, would just kind of pull the people apart. And it was always, pulling the other guy away from me, not the other way around. And this one day, I just went off, and all of a sudden, like this PE instructor we had, his name was Darren Sipe. He was the the U.S. Greco-Roman wrestling coach.
Oh, wow.
And was righted out to the point where he literally couldn't put his arms behind his head to do sit-ups because his biceps were too big. So he just grabs me with one hand, like yanks me up in the air and kind of hurls me halfway across the gym. Jeez. Which is what he normally did to the other guys. Mm-hmm. And I'm like looking around going, what? And he went, that was awesome. Don't do it again. And I don't remember what I did actually, but whatever it was, apparently it wasn't legal.
Nice. Now you did judo through your teenage years. What was your next style then? And how did that come about?
Man, I've done all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. I've done judo, kabuto, karate, arnis, aido, kendo, some Western European style swordsmanship kind of stuff, and modern close quarter combatives, which is kind of anything out to about 200 meters. Just a massive eclectic variety of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, if I'd stuck to any one thing, I'd actually be really good at it. But I've got a really well-rounded skill set and kind of a pretty holistic view of things, which is I've found very, very valuable. For example, working stadium security,
Mm-hmm.
where we didn't have arrest powers, but still got in fights constantly. I probably had, I lost count at 300. So I don't even know how many I had.
Wow.
Did 26 years, probably averaged, 2 to 4 a game, 16 plus games a year. Plus we had some pro team games in there as well. And I did a few concerts, which was a really bad idea.
Yeah.
Early days of hip hop and all that, and pulling enough guns, knives, and brass knuckles and stuff off folks that we actually ran out of places to put all of them. But the things I found was what works in the dojo versus what works in reality, and how things fit together, and the legal application versus what you're training to basically go to jail for and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just give you a really quick example. We had a guy, when the national anthem plays, everybody stops, takes their hat off, and waits till it's done. And then if the seating isn't filled yet, then folks can continue going in. So this guy's like shoves through while everybody's standing waiting for the national anthem to complete, and he almost knocked one. I was a supervisor. I had a bunch of captains and then a whole bunch of radar folks, security folks working for me. And there was a young lady who worked for me, and he just about knocked her down the stairs.
Jeez.
And these are cement stairs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she'd actually fallen. She would have been pretty seriously hurt. So I grabbed him, kind of pulled him back, and like, dude, you got to wait till the national anthem's over, be respectful. And he wasn't having any of it. It's like, no, got to get to my seat. And just tunnel vision focused on, I've got to go to my seat. And I don't care what anybody else does. Well, in class, one of the things we do, and I don't remember the Japanese name for the technique, but it's where you basically take your fingers and you kind of drive them over and behind somebody's collarbone while sticking your thumb in a suprasternal notch and making a nice tight grip in there. And it lights up the nerves like really well. It's one of those things that I never had fail demonstrating. Here's an example of how nerve techniques work. And I always said, because I was taught it, that it doesn't always work in real life. It doesn't work against people who are on certain drugs or, under just complete lost at rage or things like that, sort of certain mental conditions. But, I've never seen it not work. And I could make people dance with this thing because it hurt a lot. So I pushed the guy and he kept coming. And I tried that technique on him. And I mean, I got it. I mean, my fingers were like under and behind his collarbone. And, you could see his skin. He was wearing just a short sleeve shirt. You could see him. It sunk in, the first knuckle. He didn't notice I was even doing it.
Oh, wow.
Like nothing, no response, nothing. And I'm like, wow, this is not good. Because this guy is going to hurt himself or somebody else, and he's going to cause a disruption during a time when we're supposed to be respectful and not doing that. And so, what I did was, because I couldn't talk to him, I couldn't reason with him, and pushing him back didn't work, and trying to do that didn't work. So what I did is I stepped on the inside edge of his foot, right, kind of above the sort of where if your foot had knuckles, the back one or the top one by the arch, and I just drove I was wearing boots. I just drove my boot into his foot there, and he stopped, and he kind of looked at me like, "You're on my foot." So at least he noticed that one, and I said, "Dude, it's the national anthem. Be respectful. You can go as soon as it's done." And you got like 30 seconds left, and he just kind of had this weird look like, oh, okay, and stood there. But he was so focused on doing his thing. Now, I could have reacted completely differently, right? I tried to talk to the guy. I tried to just, light touch. I could have gone and, teed off on him, right?
Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't accomplish the goal. I would hurt him. Might have gotten fired, might not have, depending on how well I could create a witness in the moment. But it was a good example of, if I did what I was taught to do in karate, it would have backfired, right? It
Okay.
wouldn't have done anything. And so that's just, one of a bazillion examples of, kind of pressure testing things in reality versus what you practice on. Because one of the things that a lot of martial artists seem to forget is that when you practice largely with people of your same style, what's supposed to work and what's not supposed to work,
Mm-hmm.
and you are working towards the same sort of set of techniques and strategic arrangement of those techniques. And so sometimes you're actually teaching yourself to do certain things as opposed to learning stuff that actually is functional. And again, I've heard that a lot. Chris teaches it. A lot of my instructors have taught that. But I actually got to experience it in a lot of ways, like that event that I was mentioning at the stadium,
Okay.
which made it really meaningful for me.
Okay. So to back up a little bit, when did teaching become part of your martial arts journey? I know that's something it said you've been teaching for quite a while. When did you decide what kind of led to starting to teach martial arts?
So that was kind of a variety of things. So the first teaching I did started off, so I spent the night playing poker at a friend's house in college, and had a bit too much to drink and decided that, it's better to not drive home. And the guy's name was Monty. And he happened to also be a FFL firearms dealer. So he had his own, it was called Mountain Castle Arms. And so anyway, get up in the morning, go to walk to my car, and there's police tape everywhere. And I can't actually get to my car. Well, long story short, the exact same apartment that Monty had, but one unit over, some guy had broken in and killed the lady there with an axe.
Wow.
We never heard any of it. Never really even realized anything happened until the morning. And that was kind of holy crap, this is not good. So I went back and said, Monty, want to buy a gun? He went, no. What do you mean, no? Like, somebody's murdered next door. I want to buy a gun, dude. And he handed me Masada Ayub's The Truth About Self-Protection, which is a great book. It's dated now, but it's still a great book. And he said, read this, come back, and we'll talk. And there's a section in there that talks about whether or not you should own a weapon. So I came back a week later, having read the thing. We talked about it and decided that, yes, in fact, I should, I could, I'm responsible enough to do it. And so he sold me my first gun. Well, I didn't want to own a gun without being responsible as a gun owner. And I spent a whole lot of money taking a whole lot of training to learn how to do that. Well, as a result of it, I got pretty good at it. I actually shot competitively for about 2.5, almost 3 years.
Oh, cool.
And so I started teaching other people through that. And I basically was doing it so I could afford ammo. Because I still didn't have very much money.
Nice.
So that's how I started. Started teaching traditional martial arts was actually another one of those kind of you have to. So as you become a brown belt in Goju-Ryu, as an example, you start teaching as part of your ability. When you teach somebody else, you have to really understand things well yourself.
Yep.
And it's kind of better for both people, right? The student learns and the teacher learns and internalizes even better by explaining to other people. And so it's just kind of a natural evolution as I became a Shodan and Edon and whatnot to go and teach with that. And part of it was because I really enjoyed it. It was in Chris's dojo, and we used to be really good friends and that sort of thing. So that was kind of a natural extension. But I've taught some of the close quarter stuff, mostly handgun, some knife things. Taught some of the sword, shield, spear, some medieval weapons forms, stuff like that, and just kind of a variety of. Again, I'm kind of eclectic, so
Okay.
kind of a variety of different things, and mostly because of just really enjoy helping other people. I in like real day job and all that, I mentor a lot of folks. That's how I ended up in the Hall of Fame thing for my work, is because I helped a lot of people, did a lot of thought leadership, got involved, spoke at a lot of conferences, mentored a ton of people, and they all said nice stuff about me. And some of them eventually nominated me, and the committee is like, oh, this guy's really advanced the art, and we gotta do something about that. So it's just sort of a kind of natural pay it forward, thankfulness sort of thing.
Okay.
And I enjoy it. So nothing, no magic or anything like that, but it was sort of a natural.
Okay. So how did the writing start for you? Was that something you had interest in at a young age, or when did you start writing, and when did you write your first book?
So in college, I went to a lot of science fiction and fantasy conferences, and I got to meet like some of my favorite authors. I mean, like I'm actually a character in a couple of different people's books, like Bill Dietz, William C. Dietz. I actually met him dressed as one of his characters, and eventually I, as Lawrence Kane, became a character in a couple of his books. And in one of them, I got to beat the crap out of a clown, which was like awesome.
That's awesome.
So it is. So, like I had big inroads to a lot of these folks. I knew Scott Card, Orson Scott Card. He's the guy who wrote Ender's Game. Mm-hmm. I knew Larry Niven. I knew Roger Zelazny. I mean, like any of the luminaries of science fiction and fantasy from like kind of the 60s to the 90s. I knew like most of them.
Okay.
And, and not necessarily close friends, but, saw them repeatedly, things like that. Did a bunch of writing workshops. Really wanted to become a, science fiction fantasy author. Did the Writers of the Future contest, and got, I think one of my things got through the second or third cut, whatever one it is, where they actually give you written feedback. And basically they said, you suck. So I am not a good fiction writer, and I basically gave up. And I should also add, I had friends in the industry as well. So, I mean, I knew publishers and editors, and, like I had all the connections and everything. I just wasn't any good at it.
Okay.
So fast forward a year before my black belt test, I get my brown belt, highest level of brown belt. And Chris says, okay, you're going to test for black belt in a year for your Shodan. And I want you to write a thesis and bring it to the test. I'm like, oh, wow. A year thesis. Okay. So fast forward, I show up at test day. I've got a 140-page document. And he's like, what's that? Well, it's the thesis you asked for. Like, I've been working on this for a year. And he's like, no, I meant like a research paper, like, maybe 8 or 10 pages. So here I am. I'm taking my test, and the whole time I think, God, I'm such an idiot. I just wasted a year. Well, fast forward about a month, Chris finishes reading this thing, goes, wow, this is really, really good. You need to get this published. And I'm like, well, how do I do that? He's like, I don't know, go figure it out. So I did. And I ended up with a, contract. Book comes out about a year and a half after I sent the contract. And 6 months later, or whatever, the publisher calls me up and says, so what's your next book going to be about? I'm like, next book? I didn't even plan to write a first book. But it turns out I'm actually really good at nonfiction. I might not be a good fiction writer, but I'm very, very good. In fact, I've got all kinds of awards and medals and stuff that says I'm really good at this. So the second book, I actually didn't really feel qualified to write. I knew how to write, but I didn't feel qualified to. So I asked Chris if he would collaborate with me, and we wrote that one together. And it just sort of gone from there. So I've published 22 books. It's about one a year, maybe slightly more than that. And it turns out I enjoy it. Kind of goes back to the teaching question, right? I mean, part of the reason I write the books is to help, share what I know with others that could benefit from it. Part of it is obviously commercial because, I like money. And people keep liking it. So it's just been a kind of a continuous thing. Multiple different publishers, almost all martial arts related. I did do one book on contracting because that's actually what I do for a living, and I did a leadership book as well. But pretty much everything else has been in some way martial arts, violence in society, that kind of a theme.
Very cool. And I definitely want to talk about the new book, because that's actually how I was introduced to you. And you've mentioned Chris a few times. Just for the listeners, former guest of the show, episode number 34, Chris Wilder is who you've been talking about, and who you've known for a long time and written some books with. So talk about the brand new book, the one he talked a little bit about when he was on the show, that it was coming out, or that it was being worked on, but it was probably still months away from being finished. So just talk a little bit about that book.
Yeah. Actually, this is honestly my very favorite book that we've done.
Nice.
And I didn't think it was going to be when we started. In fact, about 2/3 of the way through, I thought it was the dumbest idea we ever had because of how hard it was put together. But it's turned out amazing. And so what happened was, over the years, we've had a lot of contracts where we said, well, that's because he or she is a martial artist, or martial arts are special, or, well, of course, because he or she is a martial artist. And it led to the question kind of in our minds, which coalesced into the book, Martial Arts in Your Life, which is, well, what is it that makes martial artists special? What is it that makes them unique? In what ways are they unique? And so what we did is we had this neat idea to do an international survey of martial artists and kind of find out what makes them tick. And we decided to go into a lot of depth. There's 40 questions plus some demographics information, and really understand all kinds of different aspects of people who are involved. And in the book, we basically highlight every answer to every question, the not the individual's answers, but what do you learn from the question? And then interspersed amongst that, we highlight some of the more interesting martial artists and a little bit of their story. So not all 40 questions, just a selection of things that are important, right, but stuff that really helps make it, because, it'd be pretty easy with a survey to turn into a bunch of dry, boring stuff. Instead, we wanted it to make it really vibrant and meaningful and have it connect with people. And so interspersing between the various questions, highlights of some of the individuals who responded to the survey, you get a really holistic and interesting appraisal of how are martial artists similar or different than regular folks, and what makes them tick, why do they care, and what can you learn from it, and what can you take away from it. And it was one of the findings that's not in the book is that martial artists are really bad at following instructions, and hurting them is harder than cats. And I will say it was a royal pain to pull all this stuff together, but it was simultaneously amazing and awesome. And I really appreciate all the folks who helped out, because it was not the amount of work they had to do to actually respond to everything was a lot. And some of the folks who didn't respond, we gave folks the opportunity to respond with their name or to respond anonymously. We also had quite a few people who backed out after they started getting into the questionnaire. And I asked them, do you not have enough time, or, do you find it not interesting, whatever. Almost universally, it was like, I'm having too much of an emotional reaction that I'm having a hard time actually answering this, and I would prefer not to. Wow. And it's like, wow, we must ask good questions. So we let a few people off the hook. And there are a couple who, one of them, the whole Afghanistan debacle thing happened. And he went in country with a bunch of folks to get some of the Americans out who were trapped there. So, very legit reason. He would have been happy to do it, but missed the deadlines because he was doing stuff far more important than our book.
Right.
So, variety of reasons, but ultimately, the book Martial Arts in Your Life answers the question of, are martial artists different? Are they superior or better in some way? Are they worse in some way? Why do they do what they do? And if you're trying to get in martial arts and want to be successful, it gives you a path. If you're a martial arts instructor and want to better reach your students, it helps you get there. If you're in a relationship with a martial artist and want to understand why we do all this stuff that we do, it'll really be illuminating. So it's a pretty interesting and actually quite valuable appraisal we got from the analysis of all this stuff. And I would also argue it's got some pretty cool takeaways, like if you want to keep your kids out of trouble, here's a way to do it, and even what age group you should do it in. If you want to hire high achieving employees, here's some ways to know. and all kinds of stuff that we weren't honestly expecting in creating it.
And I feel bad because after my interview, Chris had actually sent me the questionnaire, and I had every intention of filling it out, and I'd sit down and I'd look at it, and then something else would happen. I'd get another interview I had to do, and I work on 3 different podcasts and my regular job and my kids' schedule, and finally I'm like, I like, I remember that before, and I went back and looked at it, and suddenly it's like, all right, that was like 6 months ago, and the book's already published. So I felt bad because I really wanted to. I had every intention of doing it, and I felt bad for not doing it, but the thing is,
one thing you might do actually is kind of take a look, and when you read through it and see, well, how would I have answered that, and just this, is this meaningful for me? Because every individual is different, right? And you're probably going to see yourself in many of the answers, and probably not in all of them.
No, that's true. That's true. And like I said, the one thing is I say yes to too many things. That's probably why I didn't have the time. So, which I'm sure other people can relate to. So.
Nice. That does happen. That does happen. I learned a long time ago. This is my secret to corporate success in the corporate world. Never say no, but always negotiate deadlines.
Nice. That sounds like me, actually. Very good. Nice.
Well, I've had my entire career I've worked in sort of back office areas, so things that are not necessarily driving revenue, although I have been on a few capture teams. And when you're in an overhead function, if you say no, people stop asking.
Yep.
Because you're seen as a burden. But I've literally in 35 years, I've never missed a commitment that I made at work.
That's impressive.
It's intention though. I mean, I'm very careful about what I agree to, when I don't agree to, and when I agree to get it done. And I've put in some hellaciously long hours at times to get there. So,
Oh yeah, I've been there.
80-hour weeks are not your friend if you have them for too long, but I've done them before a lot.
Same with me. So I know where you're coming from. So.
Yeah, exactly. Which is another reason to do martial arts, by the way, so you don't kill yourself by sitting at a desk all day.
Great point, for sure. So what type of advice would you give someone who, let's say a friend contacts you, they've never done martial arts before, and they're just wondering, I'm thinking of getting involved. What should I look for? What are some tips you'd give them on what to look for, and maybe some things to avoid in some schools and instructors?
Yeah, great question. And we actually talk about that in the book a bit. The thing with martial arts, like many things in life, is first start off by why. Right? What are you really looking for? Are you trying to get in shape? Do you want to learn how to defend yourself? Are you interested in competition? Do you want to win trophies? Do you want to compete in, an Olympic game? Like, why are you doing it? Because if you don't know why, it's almost impossible to be successful. And in fact, we've got some data about how many different martial arts folks have tried on average, and it's a lot. And part of that's because of either the why changed, or they hadn't considered the why and just kind of went with the closest place and then decided it wasn't really fitting, or some kind of big life change happened. Those are the primary reasons. And so once you know why, then it's pretty easy to find some place. I mean, let's face it, there's a bazillion martial arts schools out there. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. I mean, it's amazing how big this industry actually is, and a lot of people don't even realize it who are in it. It's obviously there's a variety of Olympic sports and all that sort of thing, but if you define martial arts as not just like the narrow thing of like traditional judo, karate, jiu-jitsu, whatever, right? If you look at it holistically, there is just, I mean, let me put it this way. Traditional martial arts alone in 2018 generated $4 billion in global revenue.
Wow.
Their projection for this year for just the MMA equipment market is $565 million.
Jeez.
We're talking big freaking money, right?
Yeah.
And, that's something that is just like a piece of the market, because the actual definition of martial arts is any system or tradition of combat practice for competition, cultural heritage, social development, self-defense, military, or law enforcement applications. So that's really big. I mean, like if you start counting military budgets in there, we're talking trillions, right?
Yeah.
So, but the point is, why do you want to learn it? And then you can find a venue And I recommend we no more than 2.5 to 3 miles away from wherever you live or work, because if it's not convenient, you're not going to go.
Right.
Then you find the best instructor that you can who fits your style. I mentioned a long time ago in this interview about how when I started with judo, it was a bad fit. I didn't know any better because I was a kid, right? I had no idea what my learning style was.
Yep.
But I'm one of those people that needs to understand why before I'm really good at doing it. Some people are just good at, just have their natural physical ability, and they can learn, the way I wasn't able to, because I'm not a very athletic person. So, there's a variety of arts out there who could fit almost any need, and a variety of instructors who can meet almost any style. And you just need to pull those two things together and find, the best instructor you can, who's close enough that you're going to go, who's teaching something that you find interesting.
Okay.
And, there's a lot more depth to that, but in some ways it's that simple. And obviously, you can look at Yelp reviews or Google reviews or whatever, find out a little bit about the place before you go in. You can visit the place and look and kind of tell what it's all about. I mean, if you see the windows lined with trophies, that tells you something, right? It's something different than if you see a bunch of traditional, kabuto equipment or whatever along the walls. And so, you can tell viscerally by what it looks like. Almost everybody will allow you to at least watch a class, sometimes even participate in one if you sign a waiver for free, and you get a feeling of what's the instruction style like. Are people like they know what they're doing? Does it look safe? Does everybody appear to be doing something constructive, or are they wandering around lost in space, right?
Right.
Is it clean? Is it done in a way that makes sense to you? Like, can you follow what they're doing? Even if you don't maybe understand some of the terminology, is it pretty clear what they're doing? So it's relatively easy between a little, quick web search and a short visit to say, does this look like it's worth trying? And I would strongly suggest you don't get into a long-term contract.
Right.
That tends to be very McDojo-esque in many instances. And oftentimes, when you're first starting out, you don't know if you don't like it anyway. So even if it is great, why would you do a long-term contract for something that you're trying to do a test drive on, right?
True.
See if it works. If it doesn't, don't feel bad, because there's a lot of other ones out there. I mean, I personally tried, dozens of different arts, and the one I stuck with personally was because of the instructor, not necessarily the art. I mean, I actually prefer striking forms to grappling forms. That's just my natural predilections. But most martial arts have the same techniques or very similar techniques bound inside of a different strategy. So in other words, there's striking, there's grappling, there's throwing, there's, joint locks, there's oftentimes pressure points. They may or may not be a focus. I kind of think of them personally as extra credit. There's punching, there's kicking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The way you string that stuff together depends on what you're trying to doing. If it's the Marine Corps program, it's gonna be a little different than if it's, say a judo or Brazilian jiu-jitsu or something. Mm-hmm. But they all have very similar things in terms of kind of fundamentals, because let's face it, human bodies only move in certain ways. They all, human bodies have the same weak points that if you want to damage somebody, you're going to be attacking in some way. So, you have differences between empty-handed weapons, you have, different focuses and whatnot, but ultimately you're going to kind of get to a similar place if you have the right why and an instructor who can meet that why with an art that's, legitimate. And I kind of air quote legitimate, because there's a ton of them that are, and a few things that are
very true.
Like, really, you teach that?
Yep.
But yeah.
Yeah, I've told the story on a few guests. When I lived in California in the 90s, there was a school locally that he wouldn't let people come in and watch classes. He claimed it was too secret and stuff like that. But what happened, you fast forward like 6 months and suddenly he disappeared. And what people found out was he never had a day of training in his life. He actually ordered a study at home, like VHS video series of martial arts. And he would literally in his office with the VCR, watch the lesson 3 or 4 times, memorize it, and then that day teach it in that class and then repeat, and taking all these people's money without a day. Of course, nowadays with the internet, you could never get away with that.
No,
too easy.
But I will say I have seen, some really dangerous stuff. I mean, for example, Krav Maga is a very legit, real art, right?
Yes.
There are multiple forms of it, lineages, or whatever you want to call it. But some of the things that is taught in at least one of the forms is teaching you to go to jail because you're basically disarming somebody and killing them with their own weapon.
Wow. Okay.
That's really wonderful in a war. As a
Yeah.
civilian, that is not a good thing, and because you can pretty much guarantee that whatever you do nowadays, somebody's got a cell phone camera. There's this, a Ring doorbell or a surveillance system of some kind. And if you do stuff like take the knife away from the guy and then stab him with it, you're probably just trained yourself into a jail cell,
Exactly.
unless you got a
Good
really,
point.
really good attorney or you happen to be in an area that there's no cell coverage or something, right?
Exactly.
So, understanding it's really important if your goal is self-defense, for example, to understand the law. And not just generally, because that's pretty easy. Intent means opportunity preclusion, right? But the specifics in the specific area you're in. So Seattle, as an example, we've had a massive crime wave after defunding the police. And people are stealing catalytic converters left, right, and backwards, and cars and motorcycles and all kinds of stuff. And there was a training session I attended recently where they showed some video of people who caught the burglars and how they responded, and whether or not it was legal. And so, for example, if you happen, and it's a real instance, somebody backs up a rental truck to your garage, breaks into your garage, grabs your motorcycle, rolls it out, starts to put it in the car, or in the truck, excuse me, and you come out in your underwear with a gun and yell at them, and they immediately drop the bike and run. Can you chase after them? Can you shoot them? Can you whatever, right? If you don't know the answer to that, you probably shouldn't have that gun.
Right.
Right. And there's a similar thing with a baseball bat and a similar thing with, basically the same scenario, different people, different places, same scenario being repeated because there's so much of this stuff gets on video. And again, if your goal is self-defense, you need to know that thing. If it's weapons, you need to know that thing. If it's tournament competition, you need to know that thing. And you have to have your brain in the right place. I'll give you an example. So in Kabuto, which is a traditional Japanese and Okinawan weapons form, the foot is a common target of a bow staff. Same thing with the English, what they call quarterstaff. Same thing, foot's common target because in a self-defense situation, you break the guy's foot or ankle, he can't chase you, you can get away, you're fine, right? In the sports stuff I did, I was talking about the sword fighting a long time ago that I used to do, and I was, among other things, I was the head marshal, meaning I was the guy responsible for safety of the combatants and kind of like head judge. And so I was taking Kabuto, and at the same time, I was doing this stuff. It's right kind of when I just ended doing that. And so I was fighting a guy I was using a boar spear, and the guy had a sword and shield. Again, 10 weapons. And in the sport, it's not legal to strike below the knee. The reason it's not legal to strike below the knee isn't because it's a good target, it's because you can't adequately armor it. And if you again, break somebody's foot or ankle, they'll probably never heal correctly.
Right.
My son, his last football game in high school, was tackled and damaged both of his ankles. And even though he made it to a college team and he played for a couple of years in college, he's a strength and conditioning coach, does all kinds of athletic stuff, his ankles still don't work quite right from that one hit in high school. Right. So, it's a pretty serious thing to protect your feet and ankles. So, we were fighting, and when you kind of anybody's competed at a high level, you realize, when you kind of into the zone, you don't think very much. And so I saw this movement. I saw an open target, and I did a block, pivoted, and was about to throw this just massive downward strike. And I froze about a half an inch away from hitting him because I realized I was about to just bust his ankle. Wow. And, he's wearing engineer boots, but that wouldn't have done nothing to protect him. And his eyes are like huge, and everybody's like, you hear the shock sound because I'm the guy in charge of safety, right? Yep. Which, among other things, is you don't strike below the knee. And I'm like going, oh shit. Well, the reason for that is because I was simultaneously practicing Kabuto, where you're supposed to strike for the feet. And so I couldn't shift my head from the competition sporting thing, which has rules,
Yep.
and the combative self-defense thing, which doesn't have rules. I mean, well, there are some, but
Yeah.
it's more around the legalities of what you do than anything else, right? So, from only above the knees a target to anything's a target. And that's one of the reasons I stopped doing the sword fighting stuff, because I couldn't do that and Kabuto simultaneously, because I had to stop and think, and I couldn't just react. I had to respond, which takes longer, right? The OODA loop and all that sort of thing.
Yep. No, that's great. That's a great point. So kind of some fun questions to wrap it up. So who would you put on your martial arts Mount Rushmore? And it doesn't have to be four. It can be, it can be two, it can be three. It doesn't have to be four. But I used to ask for just one, and no one could ever pick just one. So I switched the question around a little.
Man, that's a great question. So, I mean, the first two that come to mind is Bruce Lee and Muhammad Ali.
Nice.
There was a guy, and I'm blanking on his name now, who was in the ancient Olympics, who is a multi-sport, just complete badass. I'd have to look him up because I'm blanking on his name now, and it bothers me. But he was kind of the modern equivalent of Mike Tyson walking into the boxing ring and just destroying everybody when he was young.
Okay.
So that guy might be on there, which is horrible that I can't remember his name. Maybe Bodhidharma, Miyamoto Musashi.
Good.
I mean, those are the kind of, those are the names that come to mind. I'd have to really think about the exactly who. I will tell you, one of the questions we actually had in the book is who's the greatest athlete of all time.
Okay.
Which we didn't say martial artist, but just to see kind of where people's thoughts were and if they would revert to martial arts or if they would look broader. It was kind of an interesting to see the thought process of the martial artists. But that's something that, I mean, those are the first ones that come to mind, Musashi, because obviously, greatest samurai like ever.
Definitely.
Partly because he had a good PR department, but also, I mean, the guy, he fought over 60 duels at a time when, you get a little cut and it gets infected and that's your that you're over.
Yep.
Bruce Lee, not necessarily because he was the best, but because he made martial arts accessible and interesting and desirable to the world. Right.
Yep.
So just a huge influence there. Muhammad Ali, because I mean,
he was the greatest.
He was amazing. Yes. So those are the top ones anyway.
Oh, good answers. So some we haven't had yet. So that's good. All right. So in all your years of martial arts, is there one philosophy that really stands out for you that you've learned?
Oh, absolutely. Don't be there when the other guy wants to fight.
Nice. I like that one. Okay.
Yeah, it's. I actually used to teach it when I was teaching. I teach as rule number one is don't get hit. Now that can be awareness, avoidance, de-escalation, that sort of stuff, or it can be if you've screwed up your self-defense and you actually have to fight to actually literally not get hit. But yeah, that's the. I mean, all the fights I've been in, and it's been a lot. Only a few of them were because there was an option. Because most of the time it was working or because I did some interesting things as a youth, like I bodyguarded strippers in private shows. I made knives and other weapons for outlaw biker gangs. I've done some interesting stuff that,
Nice.
Every so often I was in the right place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
But other than like in college when we used to go to hockey games so we could pick fights because it was fun and we were dumb enough to not realize the impact of doing that. Pretty much everything I've done was either because I was working or I had literally no choice. And so I think it boils down to, if you want to be safe, don't be there.
I like that. Okay. Now this one, you obviously can't pick one of yours. Favorite martial arts book?
That's a good one too. Especially when I can't pick one of mine.
Hey, one of my guests actually did pick one of Chris's books one time, so that was cool.
Nice.
Yep.
Although most of Chris's books are partly mine as well. So
exactly.
I think I would probably go to Lauren Christensen and he actually has two books. There's Solo Training and Solo Training 2. I was a contributing author to the second one. So if that blows that one, it doesn't count. There's still two of them. And the reason I really like Solo Training is because, first off, Lauren is just an amazing guy, just great dude. He helped me out a ton when I started writing. I've taken classes from him and trained together a little bit. He just phenomenal. And that's without, he was listed as the 13th most dangerous man in the world, according to Black Belt magazine, which we've given him a ration for ever since. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure he's quite embarrassed by that, but he was a Martial Arts Masters Hall of Fame member. I mean, just amazing guy. Nice. The reason I really like Solo Training is because it shows you don't have to go to class. You don't have to, you can do things and train a little bit every day, all day, everywhere, and the journey never stops. And it gives you all these just tips and tricks and things that you can do with and without, like a body opponent bag or other equipment. Nice. To just constantly be honing and learning and growing and doing more and more. And so I think that's a great resource.
Very cool. I will have to. I've never heard of that one, so I'll have to check that one out. So.
Pretty much anything he wrote is good, to be honest. But yeah, that's one of my favorites of his.
Cool. Now, this one, not all my guests have an answer for. It kind of depends on how you grew up. But do you have a favorite martial arts video game? Are you ever a gamer?
A little bit. Okay. I would have to say Mortal Kombat because nice. I did most of my gaming like in the 80s and 90s. So, that was like you actually put quarters in a machine. There was no Xbox back then. Mm-hmm. But I actually always enjoyed that. And then when they made the movies about it, I got really excited and tell the second one, in which case I wanted to kill the guys who wrote that. But it was total redemption with the newest one. Yeah. So
newest one was good. I enjoyed it. Yep.
Yeah, I did too. In fact, I loved the Scorpion. I can't remember the actor's name, but that was just awesome.
Yeah, when the original one came out, I actually met a few of those guys from the original movie at a tournament in Minnesota back in the early 90s. Nice. So that was kind of cool. Okay,
that is cool. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I have met all kinds of people who are like Dan Anderson and Lauren Christensen and Ian Abernathy, Chris, I mean, all these just luminaries and stuff. I've never met Chuck Norris, and I've always wanted to. He's on
my list. I found out one time that I blew my chance to meet him. I actually was a tournament in Minneapolis called the Diamond Nationals that I went to like every year, just to watch the tournament, not even compete. And one year I skipped it, and that was the year Chuck Norris came.
And that was the year.
You've got to be kidding me.
Oh, that's cute. Well, he was. There was a guy named Tim that was one of Chris's students who had a fatal illness, and the adult version of Make-A-Wish, and I can't remember what they call that. He asked to meet Chuck Norris, and they flew him down, brought him to the set of Walker, Texas Rangers. This was back when he was still actively filming. Chuck spent like most of he was down there for 2 days. He spent like most of that time with him. I mean, he obviously was doing his filming and everything as well, but gave Tim a one of the crew jackets, from the thing that says Walker Texas Ranger on the back of it and all that, and that's cool. What Tim was buried in.
Wow.
So I mean, that was just like I mean, I've always thought Chuck Norris was an amazing martial artist and a great actor. But just his character and willingness to do something like that when he's that busy, I thought was just fantastic. And so,
he's one of my dream guests. Fingers crossed I can make it happen. But
there you go.
We'll see. So, all right.
That would be cool.
That'd be fun. All right. Favorite martial arts TV show?
Favorite martial arts TV show? Wow, there's so many. I think I'll do a slight left turn on that one. I'll say Highlander.
Nice. Very cool. So I actually got to interview Adrian Paul on my show. So yeah,
nice.
That was a huge honor to have him. And I loved that show. I was a huge fan of the movie. And I actually think I liked the TV series better than the movie.
Yeah. I was going to say the same thing. Yeah. I actually liked I liked the movie, the first one.
Yes.
But I really liked the TV show. I thought it was way better in a lot of ways, but a well-written TV show, you can get so much more depth of character than you can in a movie.
Yep.
So,
All right. Favorite martial arts movie?
Favorite martial arts movie? Wow. Again, there's so many. I think I'm going to go with Enter the Dragon.
Classic. Nice. Okay.
Classic. Well, part of it is because that's what really got me excited. Judo I was doing because I was kind of told to go there, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And then I started liking it. But Into the Dragon just got me excited about martial. In fact, I bought a pair of nunchaku sticks, of which are responsible for one of my 8 concussions. But I mean, it was just. It's the classic that you can watch like again and again, and you notice that the cinematography and the quality and everything is not like a modern movie,
right?
But it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Yeah, it still holds up. It's still fun to watch. I still watch that at least once a year too. So nice.
Exactly.
All right, final question. This one doesn't have to be a martial arts movie, but do you have a favorite movie fight scene?
Ooh, I'm kind of liking Ray Park, Darth Maul, and
nice.
I didn't particularly like that movie all that much.
Yeah,
but that fight scene was awesome.
That one hasn't been picked yet. I like that answer.
Yeah, it was just. It's so. Just the whole, good and evil thing, the staff versus the swords, it was just well done, and it's just a fun scene.
Yeah, I like that answer. That's I'm gonna have to go rewatch.
Plus, the story behind how he ended up being able to play the character is pretty cool too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And he played it so well.
Oh yes, he did. Yeah. Another guy who I wish I'd met and didn't, which actually is almost like yours. He was actually at a conference one year that I chose to not go. So
okay.
I could have met him, but I didn't because I didn't know he was going to be there.
Well, maybe next time. Like you said, there's still a chance. Who knows? So
yeah, that's true. It's possible.
Nice.
It's possible.
So anything else that you want to mention before we wrap it up here? Anything we haven't chatted about?
I'll give you a second on movies. Just as a collective. I love the John Wick movies, especially the one that Mark Dacascos is in.
Yeah. I love Mark Dacascos.
That's just. Oh yeah, me too. That's just that was just too cool.
I'm a huge fan of Only the Strong, so that's one of my favorites. That's one of my go-tos when I'm when I'm bored and just want to watch something I've seen 100 times. I'll pop that one, The Karate Kid, Bloodsport, and Perfect Weapon are probably the 4 that I've watched more than any other movie.
Nice. Well, I'm a bit of a foodie as well, so I actually like Mark when he was the chairman in Iron Chef America as well. So I got a little cross-cultural thing in being a fanboy of his. So
Lawrence, I just want to say thank you, man. This has been a lot of fun. I love hearing your story, and I'm looking forward to definitely getting the book. I'll have to actually have an Amazon gift card burning a hole in my pocket, so I know what I'm going to be ordering now. So well,
it's available in ebook, in softcover, and hardback. And the hardback, not only is it sturdy enough to make good body armor. I spent $148 to send a signed copy of that to a guy in Australia. I had no idea how expensive it is to ship stuff. So do that free Amazon shipping. It's good. But yeah, I actually like the softcover looks good, but I think the hardcover is just awesome. Okay. Just the way it just turned out really nice. So if you're willing to pay a little extra. And I actually make less money in the hard covers, by the way, than I do on the soft cover. Okay. I just think it's a better book in terms of they just did a really great job on the printing.
Nice. Cool. Well, I will check it out. And when the episode's ready, I'll send you links, and I'll put links for you guys' books and everything else in there. So,
well, thanks, sir. Appreciate it. It's awesome talking with you. And I can see why you did radio for as long as you did. You got that kind of radio voice and good interviewer thing going on. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.